Welcome to the Wealth Building for Beginners podcast. My name is Kyle Demyan. I'm joined here, as usual, with Renji Mathew. And yes, for anybody that's been watching us for some time, we did make a slight tweak to the title of our podcast. Used to be Wealth Building for Dummies. We're going to start a little rebrand and call it just Wealth Building for Beginners. Long story short, for SEO purposes and for people to be able to discover and to find our podcast. And so thank you guys so much for tuning in. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about some of the red flags of IULs, Index Universal Life Insurance Policies. Now, IULs can be an excellent way to build and accumulate wealth and to be able to give you some excellent tax advantages and also some opportunities to be able to use and leverage your money. But the key caveat is if they are properly set up. Right, Renji? So, Renji, go ahead and start off the conversation with what are, some of the initial red flags that people should look for when they are having these conversations about IULs or looking into it?
Well, what people need to realize is insurance brokers are incentivized to sell insurance, right? So if you're getting insurance, you want to see what your goal is with that. So if you're looking for just a death benefit, you don't need an IUL. I mean, you can set it up for that, but you're paying higher premiums for no reason if you're only looking for a death benefit, right? So the only reason to get a cash value policy, in this case an IUL, is if you're looking for the cash value growth. So with that comes a lot of things you have to watch out for. If you're looking for the cash value growth, your death benefit is one of the biggest things. It has to be low, right? So first thing you want to look out for, the company or the broker. Are you working with someone that's a captive agent? And how many companies does the broker have access to? You want someone that has plenty of options so that you can go with an A-rated carrier. Because there's a lot of carriers out there that are C and D rated that have really good products. Sometimes they are competitive with A-rated carrier products. But if they're not A-rated carrier, like if they go under, your policy could be void. Right? You don't want that if you've been saving your money for so long. With A-rated carriers, the benefit of that working with an A-rated carriers, they've been around for over 100 years and they partner with other A-rated carriers. That way, if one of them ever goes under, the other ones step up and pay the benefits that were promised, which is huge, right? So that's one of the biggest reasons why you want to work with the A-rated carrier. Is there anything you want to add to that, Kyle, before you go on to the next one?
Yeah, you just want to make sure you're talking to somebody that really has options, like Renji said. Too often we see if you only had one option, or if you're a captive agent, sometimes it's like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it doesn't always work, right? And for insurance purposes, I mean, they could make that square peg fit into the round hole, but it may not be, to your best benefit. So you always want to make sure you're working with somebody that has many options and not just one. And on top of that, when you're working with companies, you want to make sure you're working with a company that doesn't have low cap rates and low participation rates on their IUL. And very simply enough, all that means, a low cap rate or a cap rate in general, means that your index can only grow to a certain cap. So if the index returns 9%, but you have a 7% cap, you're not going to get that full 9% return. You're going to be capped at that 7, right? So there's some companies that actually offer that have no caps. So you can have uncapped growth potential, which would you rather have uncapped growth potential or capped growth potential at maybe 6-7%? So you want to make sure you're not working with a company that has low caps and or participation rates. Now, most companies will have some form of a participation rate on it. You just want to make sure it's not a low participation rate. And simply enough, all a participation rate means is that, let's say that you have an 80% participation rate and the index returns 10%. You get 80% of that 10. So you would get credited with an 8% growth in that scenario. So when you are looking at companies, those are some of the things in the terminology to be aware of and to be educated on. Some brokers do an excellent job going into that. Other brokers just simply don't. And that is what it is. But
Yeah.
you always want to make sure you're working with somebody that at least sounds like and it seems like they know what they're talking about. And if you start to ask them some of these questions, they can answer it confidently. I think back to some of the previous podcasts we had about like interviewing a CPA to make sure you have a CPA working for you. You should almost want to interview your life insurance broker and make sure that your life insurance broker is truly working for you too. And the reason we say that is because as life insurance brokers, we're incentivized to sell life insurance. And so, unfortunately, our commissions are based on the higher the death benefit of the policies can be. And if you want an IUL for cash value accumulation, which is what they're best suited for, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Meaning you cannot have a high death benefit and you cannot have high cash value growth. It's usually one or the other. So if you have a high death benefit, you're not going to have much cash value growth. Versus if you have a low death benefit, you are going to have higher cash value growth. And that simply just comes down to because if you have a lower death benefit, you have lower costs of your insurance. And that actually kind of goes into the policy design. And the policy design is so, so important. And so, Renji, when it comes to the policy design, and when our listeners are maybe looking at illustrations and looking at what some of these IULs can look like, what are some things that they need to be aware of to make sure that they don't see in their IUL illustration when they're looking at that?
Well, the number one thing, this is what that I'll always get whenever I mention it. Most of the clients that I talk to, they're like, "Oh yeah, definitely saw that in the illustration." If you see a zero in your cash value or your surrender value, that means it probably isn't set up correctly. Because again, the whole point is to have cash value that you can borrow from, right? And if the first year or the first couple years it shows zero in the surrender value, that means it wasn't set up right. Like Kyle mentioned before, the right way to set it up, you want the death benefit as low as you can get it. And the cost of insurance with the death benefit being low is also going to be low. And with that, the cash value is going to be high. So the way it works, let's say you're putting in $100 and you're setting it up for someone that's 3 years old. If you're setting it up for someone in there that's 3 years old, the cost of insurance might be $5. So $5 is going to the cost of insurance. The rest, the 95, is going to the growth side. Same scenario. If you're setting it up for someone in their 20s, their cost of insurance might be $20. And again, I'm just throwing out simple numbers there to keep it simple. But cost of insurance, 20 going to the cost, the other 80 is going to the growth side. In that same scenario, if you're setting it up for someone in their 50s or 60s, the cost of insurance might be 100 or more. So it doesn't always make sense for that. So coming back to having zero in the cash value, if you're putting $100 in and all of it is going to the cost of insurance, yes, your death benefit's going to be high, but there's nothing going to the cash value side of things. So you will see a zero in the surrender value, and surrender value is what you can borrow from. So the worst one I've seen a lot of times where there's zero in the first 5 years or something. I think the worst one I saw was like 11 years where there's zero in the surrender value. And the sad thing is it was a mom that was setting it up for her son who was 10 or 11 years old, and her whole goal was to have cash value to borrow from for college. So this agent purposely set it up. And again, I don't know if we mentioned this before. A lot of times it's not the agent's fault because they're just taught the wrong thing, right? A lot of these companies, you come in, it's all about recruiting. They don't care about policy setting it up the right way. They don't care about how the client is affected. They just care about recruiting because they can make money. So a lot of times these agents that come in, I've talked to so many of them, they don't know how to set it up. They just bring in clients so the uplines can sell them pretty much, right? The bad part about that is so many people are hurt because of it. And that's one of the biggest reasons there's a lot of negatives out there about cash value life insurance. Because in this scenario I'm talking about, the mom specifically went to the agent to set up a cash value life insurance policy so that their son can have money to borrow from when he starts college. But in this illustration she showed me, there was 11 years of 0% cash value. Zero in the surrender value to borrow from. And it even said in the policy packet that this will lapse. I think it was like year 12 or 13, it was going to lapse. And it said that on the illustration. So they purposely set it up the wrong way. Again, it might not be the agent's fault because they didn't know any better. And I think this agent was newer, so they were just setting up the way they were taught. But the problem with that is when that mother waits till he's 19 or 18 or whatever and wants to borrow from it and sees that there's no cash value in there, she worked so hard to put money into that for that many years and thinking she's going to and believing that she will have money in there to borrow from, but she doesn't. How much more hurtful is that, right? So the whole point, like we mentioned, is to have a low death benefit, so more of your money is going to the growth side. And when it's set up that way, the cost of insurance is low. Like Kyle mentioned before, we are incentivized to have high death benefit because the higher the death benefit, the higher the cost of insurance. The higher the cost of insurance, the higher the commission, right? But when the commission's higher, it hurts the client more. Meanwhile, on the other side, the lower the death benefit, the lower the cost of insurance. The lower the cost of insurance, the lower the commission for the agent. But the lower the commission for the agent, the higher cash value the client has access to. That's the biggest, I think, the biggest thing that I wish people would learn from this. And then with that comes with the level death benefit. Kyle, do you want to go into some of the level death benefit and what that's different from increasing?
Yeah. So if you are, especially if you're younger and you're doing this for a long-term financial strategy, which number one, that is another red flag to look out for. Nobody should be selling this as a get rich quick strategy or get rich quick scheme or something. I mean, this should be a long-term financial vehicle that you plan to have for, decades. That's another one we should have added in that I didn't even think about. But just a level death benefit versus increasing death benefit. On your policy design, on your illustrations, it'll probably say either option A or option B. Option A references the level death benefit. And here's why you would rather have option B as an increasing death benefit. Now, an increasing death benefit will actually start your death benefit lower in the beginning years, which once again lowers your costs of insurance, and will have your death benefit increase over time and over the years. And your death benefit increases based on your cash value growth. So if you start with a $100,000 death benefit, and 10 years from now you have $25,000 in your cash value, your death benefit increases year over year, meaning that your new death benefit in year 10, I believe I said in that example, would be $125,000. As long as the math lined up, I think it did. But you want something that has an increasing death benefit because that purposely does lower the costs in the early years. Now, the level death benefit starts your death benefit out higher from the beginning, which in unison has higher costs of insurance from the get-go, which once again goes against the proper policy design like we continue to talk about. Now, one important caveat is that switching to a level death benefit in your later years, typically after you stop funding it, usually for people that's in their 60s or maybe 65 when they go to retire, you do want to switch your death benefit from increasing to level at that time because you're no longer contributing to it and you want to level off those costs of insurance. And if your broker, if your person that's helping you with the IUL isn't designing it to do so, that could also have a large impact on the growth and the performance of your account over time as well. And then the last red flag that you want to be able to look for, at least be able to pinpoint out, is that in every IUL, you should be able to calculate and at least to see your break-even point. And what we mean about that is at least before year 10, you should be able to identify where your cash value is at, and then you should be able to identify how much money that you've put in. And so, for example, by year 10, if you've put in $30,000 in your IUL, your cash value should be about $30,000, if not more, based on the illustration. This is another barometer that we use just to make sure that the IUL is properly designed. And basically, you want to make sure that 10 years from now, you've got more cash value than what you put in. Otherwise, it's actually costed you more than it's actually benefited you. right? And so, Renji, anything else that you want to add on to like the break even point or any other red flags? I did think of another one that I can come back to as we wrap it up.
No, like you mentioned, if at least by 10 years, normally if it's set up the right way, it would be like year 6 or 7 or something like that. And
Yeah.
if you have growth, it'll be around that. But if it's not set up for at least 10 years, then it's another red flag to watch out for. But that goes along with if you're seeing zero in the first couple of years, it will be past that 10-year mark, right? Because
Hmm.
that means you haven't been starting to build cash value until after that. So it's going to take longer. But yeah, go back to what the red flag you had, which you were going to mention.
Yeah, and the last one is that you should always ask your broker what's the maximum amount that you can fund this policy with. And that is
Hmm.
referenced, most companies call it the guideline annual premium. And that just means like that is the guideline premium that you can fund it up to or up to its max without you mecking the policy or ruining it. Long story short, we'll keep that for another podcast. But
Yeah.
you should always ask them, hey, what's the maximum amount that I can do? And the reason being is you want that maximum amount to be very close to, if not the exact amount that you're funding it with. Now, I have helped some people that are younger that start off with maybe a couple $100 and they want to go up to, maybe $500 at some point. And that is fine as long as you actually execute on that plan and you plan to, which you should, you better, but you always want to know the maximum amount because if you're funding this at $300 a year, I'm sorry, $300 a month or like $3,600 a year, but your maximum amount is close to 15,000 or 20,000, huge red flag. If you're
Hmm.
funding it at $3,600 a year, your maximum better be within the range of 3,600 to maybe 5 or 6,000 a year. You at least want it to be close. If there's a huge gap, that would be a huge red flag,
Hmm.
right? And so you want to ask that, and then also what the target premium is. Target
Hmm.
premium is kind of what the insurance company recommends if you want a balanced cash value with death benefit. Now, this can be one way. I said if you want you can't have your cake and eat it too. This can be one way to kind of have your cake and eat it too. It's a more balanced approach, but your cash value growth just won't be as aggressive as it should be if you really want the cash value accumulation. But target premium, once again, same example. If you're funding your IUL at $300 a month or $3,600 a year, your target premium should not be anywhere close to that $3,000 or $3,600 number. It should be lower. And it's going to depend on your age and your funding levels, but you definitely want to make sure that you are funding above the target premium, especially if you're looking for cash value accumulation. Right. And with that,
Yeah.
Renji, was there anything else that I missed? Anything that you wanted to add? And I think you said you wanted to talk something about the loans as well, if you want to go into that.
Yeah. So going along with that guideline level, right? So like Kyle mentioned, if you're putting in 3,600 a month a year, if it's so for me, I'd recommend it two different ways. So if the client's thinking about going up in what a premium they put in per month within the next 5 years, I usually tell them to leave that space, right? So if they're putting in $300 a month, that's 3,600 a year. So if they plan to go up in the next 2 to 5 years, then I tell them to leave that space. Depending on how much they're wanting to go to, I leave that space. But if they're thinking more than 10 years later or more than 5 years later, usually I tell them to go ahead and max this one out. So in this case, 3,600 a year. And then I tell them you can just always just start a new one. Just like what does the bank do? They always start a new branch, right? It's like having different branches and then max out this one and just do the extra in the next one, right? But that also depends on how old you are. Because if you're much older, the cost of insurance might be a lot more if you start a second one much later, too. So you got to take all of that in account. Um, but with that also comes with the loans, right? So if you're planning to use it like it's meant to, which we teach people how to use it to take money out of it as a loan to go buy assets, cash flowing assets, real estate, or whatever investment type opportunities that are there that you want to invest into, and use it like a bank. Be your own bank. This is where that concept comes from. So if you have cash value, you've been putting money aside, it's been growing with whatever the indexes you choose. Now let's say 5 years from now you have 20,000 you can borrow, right? You can borrow that, go that and put that as a down payment for a rental property. Now, instead of paying the bank the loan back, you're just paying your policy back. Now, if you didn't set it up properly and you think you have 20,000 account value, but there's not any money to borrow from, this is another reason this will hurt you, right? Because it wasn't properly structured, just like that parent I was talking about that was setting it up for their child for college. This is also why it has to be set up correctly. If it's not, when you need that money the most, it's not going to be there. If you're wanting it to borrow it, and there's also different types of loan structures. There's fixed loans, there's variable loans. These are all things you want to ask your agent. If they know what they're talking about, then they can explain to you, hey, why would you choose one over the other? What the difference is, what the interest rates are for each. Every company, every carrier can vary on all of those things, but these are all things you should know. That way, when it comes time for you to borrow, you are already informed. And a good agent, you just reach back out to them because you're not going to remember most of these things, but it is our job to remember, right? So you can always reach out and they should be available to explain that to you at that time. And if for some reason they're not, the carrier is always there available to reach out to also. That's another reason why you want to choose a good carrier, because communication with them will be huge when you want all these loans and stuff. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Kyle?
I think the last thing, and we'll call it the bonus red flag, and then I think we'll wrap it up here. But these policies grow. People like to say that they grow tax free, but they technically grow tax deferred. You can access the money tax free via policy loans. And so another thing is just keeping an eye out for people that talk incorrectly on these products, which tends to be more popular than you can expect. But it grows tax deferred technically, and then you can have tax-free access via policy loans. And with that, we don't need to go into the weeds, I guess, in this particular podcast, but just keep an eye out and make sure, if you do have somebody that's talking about IULs, that's showing you an IULs, just kind of vet them and interview them. Make sure they're working with multiple companies. They should sound like they know what they're talking about. If they rely too much on the illustration just to pinpoint and to show you everything, I think that would be another red flag as well. But, ask them if they've had any prior experience working with any other clients or helping clients take loans out of policies to go and actually, do an investment and to do that, because these products can be very, very powerful. And for example, I just helped my mom take $20,000 out of her IUL to make another outside investment. And it was great. And she was actually super pleased with, the simplicity. She had access to the money within the same week, and she was able to move the money over into another investment. And that is the power of what these IULs can do, is being able to leverage and use your money in multiple different ways. And so you want to make sure you're working with somebody that knows what they're talking about. Look out for these red flags. And of course, make sure to follow and subscribe and to watch our podcast. And so if you guys are still here, thank you guys so much for watching. And with that, we'll see you guys on the next episode. Take care.